relaxation in connection with the change of use from retail to personal service, permanent makeup studio in an existing multi-tenant shopping center. Good evening to the applicant.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Hansley Mohan of Brown, Altman, and DeLeo, with offices at 538 Broad Hollow Road, Suite 301 West, Melville, New York, 11747. Attorney for the applicant. I'm here tonight on behalf of the applicant, Holbrook Associates Development Corp., in connection with the requested parking relaxation for the property. With me this evening, I have Doug Vaggi, PE of DRV Architect PC, the project architect, and Aaron MacTay of VHB, the project's traffic expert. Our experts are available to answer any questions the board may have. Just as a brief bit of background, the property is comprised of a multi-building shopping center located along Patchogue Holbrook Road in the hamlet of Holbrook. The site is located within the town's Business 3 zoning district. The shopping center includes two one-story building, Building 1, which has a total of 20 tenant spaces, while Building 2 has a total of 2 tenant spaces. The area surrounding the property is comprised of mostly residential uses. According to the town's building division certificate, the property has been improved with a commercial building for office and retail uses since circa 1990. A copy of the building division certificate for the property has been submitted as Exhibit 1 for your reference. As part of the applicant's change of tenant application to add a new tenant in Building 1's Unit 16, the applicant requests planning board approval to permit a total of 334 parking stalls, where a minimum of 439 stalls are required. In total, tonight's parking relaxation request is for a total of 105 parking stalls. As shown on the site plan prepared by DRV Architect PC and submitted as Exhibit 2, the project space, Unit 16, has a floor area of 1,200 square feet and is intended to be occupied by a permanent makeup salon called Vivid Beauty Design, which is considered a personal service use. In accordance with the town code, such a use requires a minimum of 1 parking stall per 150 square feet of gross floor area. In total, a minimum of 8 parking stalls is required for the proposed use. It should be noted that the prior tenant for this space was a retail use. Given the town's parking requirement of 1 stall per 175 square feet of gross floor area, the prior parking requirement for this space was 7 stalls. Accordingly, the minimum parking requirement is increasing by only 1 parking stall due to the change of tenant. In addition, the hours of operation for the newly proposed tenant will be between the hours of 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. from Tuesday through Saturday by appointment only. The tenant will also have a total of only 3 employees, 2 of which are a married couple, which means that the pair will be carpooling together to the property. Based on the property's prior approval history, the subject site has previously received several parking relaxations under the following application numbers: PB 2007-35, CZ 1997-46, TC 5013, TC 4121, TC 3722, TC 4456, and PB 2016-018. Submitted as Exhibit 3 is a parking assessment report prepared by VHB. To briefly summarize, VHB conducted observations on site during the shopping center's peak periods. It was noted in the report that during VHB's site visit, a minimum of 109 vacant spaces were observed. VHB concluded that based on the size of the tenant space and the average peak parking demand, the property's current parking supply is sufficient to satisfy the anticipated demand with the addition of this new tenant. At this time, I would welcome any questions that the board may have for either myself or our experts.
Why don't we go to the staff report? If any public comment, we'll come back for questions. I don't have any cards. Did anybody come in who wish to be heard on this application? Not seeing anyone, I'm going to turn to Mr. Gonzalez for a staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. This 1.6 acre Business 3 zone property is currently improved with 2 buildings. Building 1 on the north end, approximately 50,000 square feet, and Building 2 on the south end, approximately 15,700 square feet, both CO'd in 1990. Building 1 has a variety of retail, restaurant, and personal service uses, and Building 2 contains a dental group and learning center. The last action for this property was very recently on January 17th of 2024 for a special permit for outdoor seating at one of the existing restaurants. The application tonight is for a change of use in Unit 16 on Building 1 from retail to permanent makeup studio or considered personal service. This increases the parking requirement for the shopping center as a whole by only 1.2 parking stalls, but the center overall is deficient. 439 are required, 268 are provided. The official parking assessment report by VHB Engineering during peak periods for the shopping center, which is 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. on a Tuesday and a Saturday. Minimum 109 vacant parking spaces were observed. The variety of uses within the shopping center work well in terms of parking availability. So based on the above, staff recommends the board grant the application subject to the attached conditions.
Thank you. Any questions from the board? Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Brown?
based on the staff report, I'm going to make a motion to grant the application.
It's a motion by Mr. Brown to grant the application subject to the CNRs. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Frugiero. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The application is granted. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, with respect to the conditions, there was just one item that I'd like to draw to the board's attention. I apologize. Ms. Tanner Gonzalez and I had spoken earlier today. There is condition number 2 states, architectural elevation review and approval by the Planning Division is required prior to issuance of any building permit. I know Mr. Gonzalez and I had spoken. He had indicated that it was a standard language that the town requires to be included in all conditions. We have no objection to the inclusion of this language in the condition. We just ask, because we had clarified previously via email that in the event that there's no exterior changes proposed, that such architectural review would not be required. So we just request if there would be some additional language included just to indicate that and reflect that as well.
Tanner?
I can modify the covenants. Basically, how it normally works is there'll be a tracking created during the building permit process that gets sent to planning for architectural review. If there are no exterior changes, they'll just hit it, not applicable. But if the applicant wants additional language in there to state that, we can do that.
That'll be site plan review?
No site plan review, this would be building permit process.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll,
Mr. Brown, can you just modify, or I guess we need a new motion on this.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to ask
Motion.
to rescind a motion that I had,
Just do a motion to
and
change.
I'm going to
these, yeah.
make a motion to change
Conditions.
the conditions and add, and I'm going to ask Mr. Gonzalez to state what the change would be.
There's an amended motion by Mr. Brown to modify the CNRs as stated by Mr. Gonzalez. Mr. Gonzalez?
This is in regards to condition number 2. Architectural elevation review and approval by the Planning Division is required prior to issuance of any building permit. There would be additional language that states if no exterior changes are proposed, architectural review is not required.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
On the motion to amend the CNRs on the first application, all in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? The amended application is granted.
Thank you. Have a great evening.
Item 2 on the agenda, Planning Board application, public hearing, 62 West Main Street Incorporated, care of Gabriel and Lady Felice, PB 2024-025, south side of West Main Street, approximately 76.99 feet west of South Park Avenue, Bayshore, 62 West Main Street. Applicant requests a modification of Planning Board special permit conditions associated with PB 2022-027 in order to increase the size of the proposed bar. Site plan modifications are also requested. Good evening.
Yes, good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the applicant, Steve Bertolino, 130 West Main Street, East Islip, New York. Mr. Chairman, if you just give me a moment, I'd like to hand up to the officer here some things for the board. Wait, Jay, come back. This should be, wait. He's got lots of stuff. So what I'm having brought up to the board should already have, but some of them should just help with the visual. And as you can see in front of you with the color-coded charts that Mr. Pfluger, the architect, is setting up, that's pretty much what's been handed up to you. We've got a 3-story building at 62 West Main Street in Bayshore. I was here making a presentation back in November of 2022. We came back for the decision date, February 8th of 2023, and it was approved March 1st, 2023 by this body. What we were here for about a year and a half ago was renovating this old South Shore outdoor building at the west end of town in Bayshore. It's a 2-story building. What we were asking for at the time was to have 2 restaurants on the first floor. The second floor, we didn't quite know what was going to happen. We were hoping to rent it out as office space, and I believe we were asking for one of the first rooftop locations in downtown Bayshore. This board did approve the rooftop after some back and forth, and I recall I had stuttered a little bit as far as the music, and I want to impress upon this board that we're not here to change anything that was granted on the rooftop. We are not asking for any music, no speakers on the rooftop, so we'll push that out of the way. On the first floor, we did have a restaurant on the on the east side, took up about 2,700 square feet on the first floor. We had that leased out to Kiko Ramen. And I think there was just a mistake between the planning department, and I didn't catch it then, but I did catch it now. It looks like the approval back then only allowed for a 2,700 square foot restaurant, but it didn't account for the west side of the first floor, which was the restaurant that was adjoining the rooftop. So we had two restaurants at that time. There was one on the east side of the first floor for 2,700 square feet. There was one on the west side of the first floor for about 4,300 square feet. And that west side was supposed to join with the rooftop. So as you can see to my right here, we've got some color coding so you can see on the green to the left. That should be the first floor east. On your left, we got the orange, which is the first floor west. The middle board is the second floor. We kind of put these in order on purpose. And on the right here, we have the rooftop. So on the rooftop, after going back and forth, after the board approved it, we did reduce some of the seating at the time so that we would have more planting up there. My recollection that there was only one member of the community who came and spoke. Her complaint, that was a Miss DiMartino, was about the noise, which is why I started off that we're not looking to change that. So over the last year, what's happened is we were unable, I should say the applicant was unable to rent the second floor as an office or some other use. They did engage a local broker, Mr. Guadagno from Mogul Realty Group. He was unable to get any viable tenant that was in there. They did have some interest for other restaurant businesses that wanted to come in. So the owners of the property, Carlos and Gilbert Cintron, who are behind me here tonight, a lot of people in town know them as the Twins. They have the medical facility for the veterinary right on the corner there in Bayshore. They decided that they're going to operate this restaurant, and what they did is they reached out to a lady, and that is her first name. Lady Felice is going to operate a catering special event on the second floor. So what we've done to make this one smooth transition from bottom to top, on the north side of the second floor, you can see in the middle board on the orange, we're proposing that to be like the go-between between the first floor restaurant west and the rooftop. It's going to be an overflow area, it's going to be a waiting area, and if luck has it, and it's a Friday night and the restaurant's very busy on the first floor, we will have some seating in there for dinner. Other than that, it's just going to be more of a waiting area. It will also be a transition spot from the restaurant on the first floor to the rooftop. So you may recall that we did have two access points to the rooftop, one north, one south, and then those were staircases. And then we also had the elevator on the south side. So what we're proposing now on the blue shaded space that you can see in the middle that Mr. Pfluger is pointing out is that special event catering area would be more akin to what you might see. Napa Tandy's has one. I believe the Tap Room has one. Some of you might be familiar with the Irish Coffee Pub. You might be familiar with Shandon Court, where you do have a restaurant with
Mr.
a bar.
Bertolino, is it the same owner with a different operator, or is it a different owner for that?
So, Mr. Freeland, what you have is, I want to be clear, the green area.
I'm talking about the blue and...
Okay, the blue and the orange is one owner.
Okay.
And that is also the proprietor of the restaurant is also the owner of the building. So it's going to be an owner-occupied. For the catering area, they're partnering with, did I lose you?
Mr. Ferrari?
So, yeah, this is becoming like a who's on first type of scenario. Looking at the boards in front of us, the first floor has the green and the orange.
Correct.
The green is clearly a 2,700 plus or minus square foot restaurant. What is the use of the orange?
That is also a restaurant. That's
restaurant.
It's 4,600 square feet. My recollection is that was approved because that was the restaurant that was leading up to the rooftop back in 2022. The final approval that was written up is only showing the 2,700 square feet. But it was always supposed to be two restaurants on the first floor. At the time, I had said one was tenanted. In other words, we did have a lease in place, but we didn't have a lease in place for the west side.
But the Orange Restaurant, the floor plan is going to be for a restaurant as the primary use.
That's correct.
All right, the small bar area would be accessory to the restaurant use.
That's correct.
And it will be set up that way with seating and everything else.
As you see, and that's why we handed up the same floor plans you have there. It is a restaurant, as you would normally see, with seating tables, and of course, there's a serving bar. But it is not supposed to be a bar. It's supposed to be a
And
restaurant.
then on the second floor, that becomes the connection of people who want to maybe leave the restaurant and go up to the rooftop bar.
That is correct. But in addition, I'm sure you've been to a restaurant where you have to wait outside sometimes, or you have to wait in a foyer, or wherever it might be. We're assuming that that's going to be like a waiting, holding lounge area. And like I said, if it turns out that it's a busy night, we certainly would serve meals there. With respect to the blue area, that's the catering special event. So if you wanted to have a political fundraiser, you wanted to have a wedding, you wanted to have a Sweet 16, whatever it might be, you would engage the catering aspect of the business. So we always say the twins. Everybody says the twins. Carlos and Gilbert would be operating the restaurant alone, but they're going to be partnering with Lady Felice, who is going to be operating, and she does it already. Forgive me, MJA Luxury Events. She's been in business for about 7 or 8 years, so she's been doing it a while. She's going to be relocating, how should we say, where she hosts these events to this location. The blue area, if you look on the detailed plans that you have, is actually walled off. On the north side, you'll see 2 doors to the east and west of the bar area. So those doors can be shut. It will not be open to the public on any given Monday night or Friday night, unless there's an event. Similar to Captain Bill's. If you go down to Captain Bill's, everybody knows they've got the bar, they've got the restaurant, and then if you want to have an event, they open up that backside over to the west, and you go over there for an event. That's how I can explain it so that you would understand what we're looking to do here. That blue area would hold about 100 seats. It would also have access from the rear or the south through the elevator and or the staircase. We've discussed this internally, and my understanding is for any time there's an event being held, there would be a host. So somebody might greet you at the back door, if you will, and say, okay, you're with the Smith party. We're going to bring you up to the second floor where this event is being held. It would not be open to the public, not that you have to show a badge or an ID, but you get the point. And that's what the blue area is for. So I don't want to put a percentage and say 40% of the time or 60% of the time. But a large percentage of the time, perhaps Monday through Thursday, unless everyone in town decides to throw their political events there, it's probably not going to be used at all. Hopefully on a Friday, Saturday, or a Sunday, when many people hold their special events, we're opening that up. And then, of course, when the event is over, you want to go up to the rooftop and have a drink, we'd welcome you to come there. So that's what we're looking to do here. The result of all of this is that it increases our parking by about 45 spaces.
Could I ask you a question?
Sure.
Hi, Mr. Vogel. In the blue area, would you have like rolling bars then for an event?
No,
Not
you-
a set bar?
You can see in the plan, there is a serving bar right there. It kind of backs up to the serving bar for the waiting area, if you will, of the restaurant. So they're back to back, but they're separated by a wall. And on either side of those bars, so technically maybe a better way to explain this, on the second floor, there's actually 2 bars. There's the bar in the restaurant area where your waiting room is. There's a wall at the back of that bar. At either end of the bar, there are doors that go into the event space. On the other side of the wall, in the event space, there's another bar. But that bar is only going to be staffed, manned, or used when that event space is being booked. So if you were to book a private event, for whatever it might be, we would open up that area and you would have, your own serving bar. And again, I know everybody in this room has been to certain bars, restaurants in town or in other municipalities, within the town of Islip, and you see them all over the place. With respect to parking, we have Key Cody from R&M Engineers. He did, in the short time that we were asked to redo it as best he could, he did come up with a new parking analysis. He brought up some very good points, at least that I thought. It's about 7 or 8 pages long. It was delivered to the planning department online. If the board wants to hear that tonight, I can certainly have it presented. I don't want to belabor the point of what we're doing, but in short, all we're asking to do now is take what we believe was already approved for the first floor and the rooftop and allow us to use the second floor as a holding area, expansion of the restaurant on the first floor west, and then the catering spot in the back.
Excuse me, you said before a restaurant on the second floor. It's a holding area?
No, it's a holding area for the restaurant on the first floor. No, just think about instead of having to wait outside for your table to be called,
You'd be upstairs.
we would bring you
waiting and
upstairs.
then have to come down.
I don't know what label you want to put it. You want to call it a lounge, you want to call it, a waiting room, but it's going to be more than that. I mean, again, if it's extremely busy, it will be part of the restaurant so that we could sit somebody at one of the booths or tables and say, let's serve you here, if we
Mr.
need
Bertolino,
to.
what type of restaurant is this? You said they're going to be operating a restaurant. What is it?
You mean what kind of fare?
Is it already established what they're opening up there? I mean, you said it's a restaurant. I'm not following you go to the second floor for a lounge to come back to be holding for a restaurant on the first floor.
No, and that's why I didn't want to use the word lounge, but again, I'll use Tellers. I frequent Tellers, if you're familiar with that place. I'll hang out at the Gold Bar until my table is ready, and then they'll escort me into the main restaurant or upstairs, wherever it might be. Here you go.
Hi, my name is Lady Felice. The restaurant would be authentic Latin cuisine, Hispanic, from the Caribbean, from Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, and Colombia.
And how many seats do you have in the restaurant for dinner?
We have roughly, I think it's 100 or so.
It's not part of it.
Plus the other restaurant. I thought she was the kid.
Mr. Friedland? Are you asking just for the second floor or for the first floor restaurant that's all?
Well, the second floor is not a restaurant, correct? It's just a holding area. How many tables, seats do you have to serve people? How many dinners a night can you provide if you fill every seat once?
192. So it's 192 for first floor, second floor, and third floor. Combined, and again, I'm trying not to confuse you. On the west side of the first floor,
Yeah, just
the orange,
those in orange only.
it's
just this restaurant.
192 seats total for all three
For
floors.
dinner, not for lounge purposes, for dinner purposes, 190 seats for
No,
dinner.
no, not necessarily for dinner, because we don't anticipate serving dinner on the roof.
So that's sort of my point. So going
Right.
back to my original question, how many seats do you have for purposes of serving dinner?
I hear them coming up with that answer
Okay,
behind
so
me.
if you want to
just-
continue, we can come back to that, but
Yeah.
that's what I want answered.
Do you know how many? Yeah, it was the 192. And how many are just for the restaurant, not counting the bar?
The event space?
Just step up, say your name, tell them.
Sure. Hello, my name is Nick Pfluger from Bola Pfluger Architects. I'm the architect on the project. So, as it was said, it's 192 seats for everything that's in orange. And I'm sorry, the question was how many seats?
Just for the restaurant, not for the bar on the roof.
So the bar on the roof was? 58. So the bar on the roof is 58 seats. So 192 minus 58, it's about 140, 130 and change.
So the rooftop is 58 seats for purposes of primary use being serving alcohol, a bar. What is the amount of seats for the primary use of a restaurant is my question? Between the three stories, what is the amount of seats that the primary use is for a restaurant is what I'm trying to get the answer to.
131.
Forget the ramen restaurant, just the ground floor is 76 seats. 76, and then what about the second floor? 76 and 58.
So it's 76 seats for the first floor on the orange, and how much on the second floor? And 58 on the second floor for the orange portion.
Okay, so 76 on the first floor for purposes of being the restaurant serving dinner.
Correct.
Now, clarify for me, because I'm hearing two different versions of what's happening on the second floor. In the orange area on the second floor, are those tables used for serving dinner, or is that a holding area like Teller's Bar, where people go to have drinks until there's a table available?
Yeah. So it is primarily a holding area, but I would think of it more as an overflow. I think something else to note architecturally, you can see in the floor plan, there's an open to blow space in the middle of the second floor orange area. So there is a continuity of a volume of space from first floor restaurant to second floor restaurant, from orange to orange. And we do have a stair coming up, not a fire stair, more of a a connecting stair from the first floor to the second floor. So architecturally, it is, one volume, and it'll feel like one space. So that second floor is more of a lounge, calling it a holding area, but, drinks and food could be served there. So we are counting it as restaurant and the appropriate amount of seats per the calculations.
Okay. I would suggest it's a very large holding area for people waiting for dinner. But why don't you finish your presentation? I have a lot more questions at the end.
And again, I tried to use examples that the board may be familiar with. And, one of the restaurants I brought up before was Teller's. And you're familiar with the bar at Teller's. You got the fireplace area, which has some tables, and then you've got a couple of tables in the front of the bar area. And I've been seated at both, waiting for a table in the main dining room. I've had, appetizers there. If you can picture that, if you've experienced that, that's what we're talking about. It is not intended to be the main restaurant area. However, we could not simply say it will never have a food service there. We have to show it on the plans as though it is a seating area for parking purposes and all other purposes. So we're trying not to deceive the board by telling you and showing you, hey, this is seating, this has to be counted as seating. But in reality, this is what we envision that use being. It's not going to be the primary, dining area, if you will. We're using the term lounge because we know people will hang out there, but we're not envisioning it as a separate and distinct lounge area other than waiting at the restaurant. And also as a duct, if you will, getting to the rooftop, going up there. You may have I don't want to say a crowd, but you may have 30 or 40 people up on the rooftop on any given Wednesday night in August, and it rains. Where are all those people going to go? So if we can bring them down to that second floor, again, in that lounge area, that would be what we would be looking at. So you'd be transporting the people from up to down if you had inclement weather that sprung upon you. There's multiple ways that the space will be used, but we do need to call out what that floor space would hold as far as seating arrangements, which then translates into the parking calculations.
And, Mr. Bellino, the only kitchen facilities then would be on the first floor, nothing on the second floor?
That's correct. And the kitchen facilities on the first floor, would also be used for the event space. So if there was a catering space, I believe there's a dumbwaiter in there as well. That would be serving the food from the first floor up to the second floor. So there's no separate distinct kitchen on the second floor nor on the rooftop on the bar. I'd just like to bring in Kay and Cody from R&M just to speak about the parking calculations that he did, because he's going to do a much better presentation. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chairman and members of the board. We submitted it earlier today, but Kelly had let us know, I think Thursday, that any updated parking information that we could provide would be good. I did prepare a letter that uses more up-to-date parking data. I'd like to be able to submit that to the board. It was submitted online, but I just don't know if everyone has a copy yet. Yes, for the record, Key and Cody from the firm of Robinson and Mueller Engineering. Our office is at 50 Elm Street in Huntington, New York. So as Mr. Bertolino has said, we were previously before the board for this application where it was the same, with both tenants on the ground floor being restaurant uses and then the rooftop being an accessory restaurant use for one of the tenants on the ground floor, where that second story was proposed as office space. This application is essentially exchanging that office space for a combination of sort of a lounge and holding area for the restaurant on the ground floor and a private event space. The private event space is depicted with 100 seats, and it comprises about 5,500 square feet, where the lounge area has about 58 seats. Previously, we showed the board data that we had used when we did the original application back in 2022. We were asked by planning staff to see if we can scrounge up any other supplemental observations that we have. We did do counts in the summer of 2023 in August. We did them in roughly the same area as we did for the original set of counts. It's sort of that central area, sort of by Salt and Barrel, with the parking to the north and to the south. What we found was the peak demand that we observed occurred on a Saturday, at this point at 6 p.m., where there were 571 vehicles parked out of 681 total spaces, leaving 110 vacant spaces. We then estimated the future parking activity associated with the entire project as a whole, and for that we used the ITE, the Institute of Transportation Engineers, and their parking generation manual, the 6th edition. We used the land use codes fine dining, high turnover sit-down restaurant, and then we used information that we obtained from our files at R&M Engineering. For the catering use, we had performed parking observations at Watermill Caterers over in Smithtown on 347, and we used that to estimate the parking demand for the private event space, as it doesn't necessarily correlate to a restaurant space. Based off that information, we found the peak parking demand would occur on a Friday with 181 vehicles parked, but this would not be considering any shared parking between various uses on Main Street and any time of day differences between uses. We then began refining that estimate, and what we found out essentially is once you do a 35% shared factor between parking between different uses on Main Street, different uses in the building, that knocked the number down. And then once you apply a time of day factor, meaning, for instance, a restaurant might generate its peak parking demand at 7 p.m. and only 75% of it at 9 p.m. And so we applied that along with our parking observations, and we found with those taken into account, we end up with 668 vehicles parked out of 681 total parking spaces, leaving 13 spaces in the
So
area
let's just
vacant.
stop there for 1 second. Let's do the parking on the second floor. How many seats, including bar, without people standing, how many seats are there on the second floor between both uses?
For the catering space, there's
Both. Add them up,
there's
tell me the total
proposed
number.
100 seats for the catering, that's including the bar, and then 58 for the lounge space,
Okay, so
including the bar.
158. And what do we calculate in for the standing area, around the bar and the lounge area? How many?
I believe it's lumped in with the others. I believe for the whole tenant two, we have 260 square feet. That includes the first, second, and third floor for,
So just for understanding your calculation for parking, so you did not count anything besides the seats? You didn't account for anything for people standing at a bar or a lounge area?
we did the 260 square feet of bar space as well.
So how many spaces did you come up with?
21.7 for all of tenant two, which is the,
For the entire second floor, how many spaces did you come up with?
for the, including,
The entire second floor?
I don't have it by floor, I'd have to do them, I have it by tenant.
Okay, so,
Well, if it's 1 per 2 for seating, and we have 158 seats, that's roughly, what, 77? And then you have, in terms of linear feet at the bar, I can't tell you, let's say half, because there's 4 bars total, so let's half it for 130 over 12. It's going to be roughly 11, so maybe 85 parking spaces or so.
okay, so you've calculated 85 for the second floor?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
In terms of parking required via the town code.
Okay, you can continue.
So we figured out that there would be 668 vehicles parked out of 681 total parking spaces in the area. I'd just like to clarify that that area is only the immediate area around the site. It's the 2 parking lots to the north, and then 3 to the south, and then the on-street in the area. Main Street in Bayshore has a large amount more municipal parking to the east and west, and it's our opinion that essentially it's not a matter of low parking supply, it's a matter of convenience. People will park in the more central parking spaces initially, which fills those up quicker. As you disperse and get towards the outer edges of Main Street and Bayshore, you start getting less and less people parked in those areas. So despite the parking study showing there's enough space in the central areas, people will still park in a wider area, so there's even more parking than what we're depicting. In addition, this area sort of has to function in this way. The Main Street area, much like other main streets, like for instance Huntington Village, there's little to no space for each individual business to have their own parking lot, and thus the area relies on municipal parking. It's sort of a self-limiting use in that if the applicant takes on that restaurant space and they're not getting, individuals there, obviously that's not good. So it's their own self-created issue where if they're not getting the business, then it's their issue, and if that's becoming because of parking, then it will self-regulate. So essentially what we found is there is an adequate amount of parking in the area, and we believe as you go further out, there would be even more parking than what we're stating in the report. We'd also, rideshare is also a factor that we'd like to talk about too. The whole area of Main Street Bayshore, you do get a lot of rideshare. There's a lot of restaurants, a lot of bar activity, so you may get people that aren't parking. The event space itself also would generate a lower amount than a typical restaurant would, as let's say you're hosting a wedding, you would be utilizing maybe a shuttle, moving large groups, families in a single vehicle. You may get 4 or 5 people rather than 1 or 2 that you would get with a restaurant. So the private event space would generate less than if it was restaurant space, which is why we've made that distinction between the catering, private event space, and the lounge space.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I wanted the board, I know there's a lot of technical details, 681 versus 690, but I think it's important for the board to know a couple of things. In any downtown, especially Bayshore, and I made these arguments in the past, and specifically with this application, you have a building that's approximately 16, 17,000 square feet with no parking whatsoever, and as we know in this environment, it's almost impossible to rent retail space. It just is not viable. Office space is a dime a dozen in the office parks of Melville and Hauppauge and even Bohemia, that you can't have a viable office space everywhere in downtown Bayshore. It seems to be that the restaurants and the, I don't want to say entertainment, but whether it's a bar, those seem to be acceptable in the town to the community. You have approximately 1,000 new apartments in town where people can walk. They can walk into downtown, they can get a meal, they can have a glass of wine if they choose to. And as Mr. Cody pointed out, the owners of the property are investing their own money, not only in purchasing the building, but in now building out the space for this restaurant that they think is going to work. They're putting in millions of dollars into this, and if it fails because John Q. Public can't find a spot to park, then that's their loss. That's the risk that they take. It's unfortunate that there is a lack of parking in town, and maybe someday there'll be some changes to that to put it in. But if you're going to create a walkable community and create a more vibrant downtown, as opposed to having empty spaces that are untenantable in other areas, such as retail or office, I think you have to let the applicant do what they want to do financially and say, okay, we're going to approve the restaurant, and not that you want to turn a blind eye to parking, because it is important, but as Mr. Cody said, if you pull up on a Saturday night and you can't get in because you can't park your car, either next Saturday you're going to take an Uber or you're going to go to Babylon. And if you can't get a spot there, maybe you try here next week. And I said this before, I've got friends, and myself included. I live in Islip, I'll take an Uber up if I have to. I'll walk, I'll call a friend, let's ride share. So you have all those opportunities in the downtown district, the walkable district that the town's trying to create, and all we're asking for is the opportunity to develop the second floor here so that it's not sitting as vacant space. And we think it's a good use of that space because we're not bringing in a third tenant. We're just bringing in a partner, if you will, to help us with the event space. If there was some confusion before, I apologize. It's not what I meant to do. But overall, we're looking to have 2 restaurants, one on the first floor, which is the Kiko Ramen, and then one on the first floor west, which will also encompass the second floor and the rooftop as well. If the board has any questions, of course, we're all here.
Let's do the staff report, then we'll come back for questions. Did anybody come in and wish to be heard on this application? Not seeing anyone, I'm going to turn to Ms. Wozniak for a staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The property is located on the south side of Main Street, adjacent to Gazebo Park in downtown Bayshore. and it received planning board approval in March of 2023 to permit a 55-seat restaurant and a 188-seat bar with rooftop bar service and seating. As part of the original proposal, the second floor of the building was proposed to be office space. Tonight, the applicant is looking to allow the second floor to become part of the proposed bar, increasing the overall seating of the bar to 294 seats and the overall area to 12,943 square feet, plus the open rooftop area of approximately 6,100 square feet. Based on the floor plan, the majority of the second floor is dedicated to private party space in the back, with additional seating and bar space in the front. The overall increase in seating from the previous approval is an additional 106 seats and 8,000 square feet. This does substantially increase the required parking. The applicant did provide an updated parking study that was conducted in August of 2023, which shows the closest large parking lot to the southwest had a vacancy rate of 49% on a Friday night at 7 p.m. and 24% on a Saturday night at 7 p.m. This bar would be one of the largest bars in downtown Bayshore, and there are some additional concerns regarding late-night activity and the potential of the establishment to operate more like a nightclub with loud music, dancing, and crowds. It is also important to note the concern in general for the downtown Bayshore area to maintain a healthy mix of uses to foster a vibrant, resilient, and sustainable environment for both the residents and businesses. As mentioned, this would be one of the biggest bars in Bayshore and one of the first rooftop establishments. There are some general concerns regarding the size of the bar and potential for large crowds on the rooftop. Therefore, planning would recommend the board reserve decision.
Just clarification, because I'm sort of still not following this completely. The blue area is going to have 100 seats, correct? The bar
Yes,
and
for
the
the
tables?
event space, yes.
Okay.
I think it's
and-
111.
And the lounge, transition, whatever we're calling it, area is going to have how many seats?
58,
Okay, so that's 158.
yes.
So how did the number of seats in the restaurant only go up by 106? It's 100.
We reduced the rooftop seating.
So what have you taken out of the rooftop? And how did you, do we have a two-floor plan difference here?
You mean the exact number that we took out
So,
of?
but then we removed the seats, we still have standing area. It's not like we dropped the
No, we
square footage.
put in some planters. I said that a few moments ago. I don't know what the exact change is. I don't know if Mr. Fluger.
How big are these planters?
Mr. Friedlander, I apologize. I didn't anticipate that specific question.
So
We'll
my
look-
concern is this, and this is why I'm asking these questions. Obviously, when we approved this last time, we had reservations about it, and that dealt with the rooftop becoming a club, but something that's changing the character of Bayshore somewhat. So we approved office space on the second floor, 2 restaurants on the first floor, and a bar, lounge, whatever we want to call it. On the top floor, we had the discussion about no music outside and the rest. Now we're back before us, and I'm not really following, the second floor, and why I was asking the questions, we like restaurants in downtown Bayshore. The first floor is a great idea, but the second floor, to me, is another lounge that's being created. You know, people are gonna, it's different than the one at Teller's, I'm familiar with Teller's, but people are gonna go upstairs, there's no restaurant, there's even no kitchen on the second floor for the catering part of it as well, so they're gonna go back up and down with 100 plates to also serve people in the lounge area. My fear is we're creating this large bar, nightclub, whatever it's gonna turn into, versus 2 restaurants on the first floor with a bar on the rooftop. And that's my concern on this project. And the explanations tonight, in terms of what's happening on the second floor, leave me more confused or more alarmed about what's actually going to happen with this when it's opened. And that's where my concerns come from. I'm all for restaurants. I'm all for creating a different restaurant on the second floor. I'm all for doing something along those lines. I'm not all for creating a monster establishment that turns into a bar, nightclub, or an after-hours something else. It's a lot of seats in there, which is why I was asking how many tabletops or how many people you're going to serve a night in order for them to stay viable. I mean, I'm not really as much, the parking increases, but downtown Bayshore, as you said, has parking issues. We can go through that and go back and forth all day long on that. My concern is for them to stay viable and to make money and to keep it an operating business, you're going to have to serve either a lot of people at dinner or you're going to have to serve a lot of alcohol because it's a very large square footage. You're not going to have office space there. You're going to do something with that second floor.
So a couple of things, Mr. Friedlander, and I do appreciate your concerns, and I would throw 2 things at the board. Number one, my recollection was that we covenanted last time that we would close that rooftop by 12 as opposed to 2. I think that the code allows for a 2 a.m. closing, and we said we would close at 12. And I think that was in response to the homeowner who showed up. And we still have no problem doing that. We would also covenant that this would never be a nightclub. I understand that concern, and, we heard whispers of that concern as well before we got here. And we could put that covenant right in there. This is never to be a nightclub. Just like we have other covenants that say the town has the right to call us back before the board and explain ourselves if we violate them, we would put that in there as well. It is not our intention to create a nightclub in any way, shape, or form. However, thinking about that second floor space, it's vacant. It's going to be vacant. The good news is you've got an owner-operator. So from your point, how does a tenant operating a restaurant bar make money when they've got to pay rent at, $18,000 for the square footage that we're talking about? In this case, the tenant is the owner. So you have an owner-operated establishment that doesn't have to worry that they didn't serve enough alcohol last night to cover the rent. What they're looking to do is to make this seamless so that you're not walking from the first floor, which is beautifully finished with 2 nice restaurants, going up to the rooftop, which is beautifully finished and a great place to hang out, and you're walking past a desolate, decrepit cement floor with no walls. They want to make use of their building. They want to make use of their space. They're willing to spend the money to build that space out. But they also know that they don't need to build out an entire restaurant. They're not looking to have 2 floors, 16,000, 17,000 square feet of restaurant space. So what do? The middle ground is saying, how do other establishments utilize that additional space? They use it as event space, and we see it all throughout the town of Islip. And hopefully I pointed out some examples that the board can relate to because they're local. And what we would do in that blue area is close the doors in the back, close the doors in the front, and unless somebody comes along and says, I want to give you $1,000 an hour to rent that on Sunday for my little girl's party, we're going to keep that closed. On the other side of it, I apologize if I created the confusion. We look at it and saying it's a nice cohesive way to go from floor 1 to floor 3, and we hope the board, looks at it that way as well and gives us the approval.
Mr. Brown?
Oh, yes, Mr. Berlini. My memory's not what it used to be, but what was the original proposal when we started this project?
As stated by Ms. Wozniak before, we anticipated that we would put office there, and again, I hopefully did not misspeak. My recollection was that the original application was for 2 restaurants on that first floor, and I think the final approval came in and it only listed 2,700 square feet, and that was incorrect. And I think that was a mistake that was missed both by the town, myself, and the architect. Beyond that, all we're looking to do now is change
No,
that second
I
floor, which we
understand that.
thought was going to be office.
And-
Because at that time, Mr. Brown, we had hoped that we could rent it and we could get some income from other than the owner.
I fully understand that. I think that the concern, which I'll follow up where the chairman was going, is that if the second floor had more of a restaurant flavor than a lounge flavor, I think we'd look on it a little bit differently.
How do I put this? Again, that the north side, the orange side, the north side, Mr. Brown, will have more of that restaurant flavor. You will see traditional tables. You will see a bar where you could stand. And the best visual that I have, not that I go bar hopping, but I do frequent Tellers. And the best example I can give you is the Gold Bar at Tellers, where you've got
How many bars
those
are at
tables.
Tellers?
To my knowledge, there are 2,
How many bars are shown on your floor plans here?
4,
Okay.
including the rooftop.
Okay, that's, made my point there. Mr. Frugieri?
Yeah, that's basically where I'm going as well. I hear the way you're describing this project. I hear about the restrictive covenants, but we all know restrictive covenants usually kick in after there's a problem that's been reported, and then we have to go and enforce. This board, when they make decisions, tries to make sure there are no problems with the community in the future. We try to avoid the problems. I hear the way you're describing this project, but as I look at the floor plan, I'm seeing something different. If you put this floor plan in front of me, absent your presentation, I would say this is one big bar. I look at the restaurant, the 4,368 square foot restaurant on the first floor, and half of that is a bar area. It's a very large bar for a mid-sized restaurant. And then you go up to the second floor with the holding area and the event area. There's also 2 nice, large cocktail bars. Then you go up to the rooftop, and obviously there's a large bar there. So I see bars on every floor. This, to me, looks more like a bar than it does a restaurant. I don't see a lot of seating. I don't see a lot of seating for a successful restaurant. And to the chairman's point, when it comes to the bottom line, you know, when you get a restaurant without a lot of seats, you have to serve a lot of alcohol to make your money. And I think this is going to be, if not maybe intentionally, to be successful, it's going to turn into a bar, and it's going to turn into a problem. And that's my concern. I'm not even getting to the parking issue. I can't get to the parking issue. I have to get past the use issue first.
So, I'm sorry, Mr. Ferrugieri, and I mean no disrespect. If the bars were smaller and we were to show more seating that Mr. Friedlander is suggesting as a typical restaurant, what I'm hearing is we might be more, apt to get an approval than just showing all the bar space. We took a different approach and thought that we're not necessarily going to build out, if you will, again, 17,000 square feet of restaurant space, because that's a lot of plates you have to serve. That's a big kitchen that you need to serve. Whereas if you've got it as 40% usage, if you will, on the blue area, which is your catered special event, it's not going to have that same volume that you would had we built it out and shown it as a restaurant. I think we could work with the planning department. I mean, I know you're reserving decision, or at least that's what's been recommended from the planning department. We can go back and work with the planning department to try to find some middle ground. I just hope the board understands what we're looking to accomplish here is not a nightclub. It's not a tremendous bar. It is a primarily restaurant use. It'll be different than what you know because of the rooftop, and we discussed that a year ago. But in the end, we just don't want that second floor vacant. And that's pretty much where it's winding up. I don't need to explain. I'm sure you are all aware of, the occupancy rates and what's happening, but it's very difficult to rent office space, especially on a second floor, between a restaurant. It's just not really conducive, and it's certainly not conducive to retail either. And that's why we thought this would be a good use.
I'm going to turn to Ms. Cruz.
Okay, so I kind of understand the vision that they have, because I've been to, there's a Dominican uptown in Washington Heights that has almost this exact plan. They have a club in the middle, the rooftop at the top I've been to, because I've had brunch there.
Do you have a name
Great
so we can go?
brunch, and it's a rooftop in Washington Heights, and it has the same floor plan as this. While I do think it's great, maybe to me, if the second floor would have just been private events, I could maybe say, okay, because then you have the restaurant that people will know that the food is great, and then they'll want to do their private events upstairs and just for the second floor. Or maybe you could flip it and put the lounge downstairs and make the restaurant on the second floor, so that you're not, because this seems all bar, and it seems just like it was when I went to that restaurant in Washington Heights. It's the same floor plan. So to me, I think either maybe maybe just making the second floor a private event space might be better, because it just seems like this is just a bar coming full blown, and we had so much reservations about the rooftop to begin with, so it just now feels like this is a full blown bar going, and just the restaurant at the bottom there's not enough seats for the restaurant, so they're going to go back up to the second floor. So either make the restaurant the second floor and then the lounge downstairs, so that if there's seating on the second floor, they can go, they can wait downstairs, as opposed to bringing them upstairs to bring them back downstairs. So that's just what I see here. But I do have and parking in Bayshore is really hard. I can't see somebody coming to an event having to walk across the street to find parking. It just doesn't, I'm having a hard time with the second floor.
Understood. And again, hearing everyone that's given us feedback, which I appreciate, the opportunity to respond, just what popped into my head is, if we were to get rid of the bar in, let's say, the catering, the blue area, or if we were to get rid of the bar on the second floor lounge waiting area, now we've got 3 bars on, instead of 4. When I said we'll go back to planning, I don't need to waste the board's time tonight doing that, but I hope you would keep an open mind if we can find some agreement, hearing all of your concerns and responding to those concerns. Perhaps there's a middle ground that we can, come up with. Again, just not looking to keep that space vacant.
Ms. Cruz?
Yeah, one more thing. I noticed that the rooftop now, they don't have tables. It's more standing, is that what that is on the top? Those were different on the
I think we had some
floor.
small booths. I don't think it was ever supposed to be like a seating,
Okay.
serving area.
Because these don't look like booths. They look like tabletops, standing, yeah.
No, but what I'm saying, in the past, the renditions that I recall seeing, it was never supposed to be where you're going to be served a meal on the rooftop.
No,
That
no,
was never
not
the
meal, but
intention,
you're gonna, it was more of like a sit down and have your drink, as opposed to stand around and have your
It
drink.
changes
Right.
the character of the
Un-
use.
Yes, thank you.
Agreed and understood.
Yes.
We'll work on that.
Any further questions from the board? Not seeing any. The applicant wanted anything further?
No, I just appreciate your time and consideration. Thank you.
So obviously, there are a lot of questions for us that we'll be looking for answers for, so we can
We'll-
make a decision on this. But, the way it looks to us this evening is it's sort of transitioning from an application that you originally brought, saying a restaurant, 2 restaurants on the first floor, office space on the second floor, and a lounge/bar on the third floor, which we went back and forth on and agreed to. Now you're back making that change, so.
Understood.
And the change that you've made, adds more bars, takes away seating on the top floor on the outside, and adds more standing room for people to stand around and have drinks, which changes the character of the use. And for the amount of square feet for that restaurant, not a lot of seats, be serving dinner. So those are our concerns. You don't have to answer them now. You can,
I don't need the last word, but I just want to clarify something, because my understanding is we do have the existing approval, which would be void if the board saw fit to, grant us this new modified version of it. However, and if I'm misspeaking, Ms. Wozniak can correct me, my understanding is that the approval that was issued, written approval in March of 2023, just sets forth 2,700 square feet of restaurant space, and I know that was wrong, and I apologize that I didn't catch it then.
So the conditions are for the restaurant. So the ramen place was the 2,700 square foot restaurant, and then if you look further down the conditions, there's the special permit approved for the bar, which has the correct square footage and seats.
Exactly, but just with the wording, I think it was number 6 or number 5 in the previous one, where it just said the restaurant space. Just wanted to be clear that there were 2 restaurants at the time.
They applied for a planning board special permit for a restaurant and then one for a bar.
And
They're
one-
2 different types of special permits.
Yep.
So the one in orange is, they're actually modifying one that we classify as a bar.
Okay.
So I think that's like the difference. I know
Okay.
sometimes restaurants and bars can kind of be like a mixture between the two, but the green one was for a restaurant, and then the bar special permit was for the orange and the blue.
Okay, thank you. As
You're
long as I know if we were to continue down
Yeah.
that path, at least we could do what was approved. Thank you very much. Sorry for the long
thank you.
time.
Is there a motion?
Mr.
Yeah,
Chairman?
before-
Mr. Ruggieri?
Yeah, before we get to a motion, Kelly, what is the timeframe for the approval, for the planning board approval? Is it a 2-year approval? Does it expire? They have 2 years to, so if this was March of 2023, we're coming upon that 2-year mark.
Correct. They would have to
Turn the mic on so those watching can hear.
They would basically, if they don't do the improvements, they would have to apply to, or like write a letter to the commissioner, and the commissioner would review it and see if she wants to give them the extension or not.
Mr. Barnolini, I think you should be aware of that. That's all.
No, I am, and I appreciate that. Just so you know, we are doing the exterior facades right now, and that is being worked on. We did pull the permit for the facade,
Okay.
and that's in the process, so hopefully we can continue. Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Brown.
I'd like to make a motion to close the public hearing and reserve decision.
It's a motion by Mr. Brown to close the public hearing, reserve decision. Is there a second? I'll second. Mr. Wilson, all in favor? Opposed? We're reserved. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
Item 3 on the agenda, major subdivision modification of DCNR, public hearing, Gary and Lorraine, is it Renfettel, PB 2024-026, east side of North Equestrian Court, 200 feet north of Liberty Street, Hauppauge, 3 North Equestrian Court. Applicant requests modification of the deed, covenants, and restrictions, and planning board conditions to allow for encroachments into the existing 50-foot conservation easement area. Good evening.
Good evening. May I submit? Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. On behalf of the applicants, Mr. Gary and Lorraine Ramphel, I am Samuel L. Bifulco of Son Ward Braff Cochignano, PLLC, located at 100 Veterans Memorial Highway, Suite 100, Hauppauge, New York, 11788. And before I begin my formal presentation, I'd like to express my appreciation to the board, as well as the engineering division for everything you do, all the work on this application, and to serve the town of Islip. The subject premises is located at 3 North Equestrian Court, Hauppauge, New York, 11788, and is known and identified on the Suffolk County Tax Map as District 500, Section 18, Block 1, Lot 005004. The subject premises is located in the town's residence AAA zoning district, is approximately 39,600 square feet in size, or 0.91 acres, and is improved with a 2-story residential home, an in-ground pool, and several accessory structures. The subject premises is a through lot. It is located on the east side of North Equestrian Court, to the north of Liberty Street, to the west of Bedford Avenue, and to the south of Terry Road. A 50-foot by 202-foot landscape buffer area exists along the eastern boundary of the subject premises, where our property meets Bedford Avenue. The applicants are requesting modifications of the deed, covenants, and restrictions and planning board conditions to allow for encroachments into the existing buffer area. I submitted a survey of the property this evening, designated as Exhibit A, to reflect the location of the landscape buffer area for your reference and review. The request arises due to several existing encroachments, including a gazebo to the northeast, a portion of the pool patio to the northeast, a water feature to the east, a second gazebo to the southeast, a section of a 4-foot post and rail fence to the southeast, and a 6-foot chain link fence with privacy screening that runs along the northern, eastern, and southern borders of the property. These encroachments were present when my clients purchased the property in 2005. The applicants now seek to sell their home and are faced with legalizing the encroachments into the buffer area. And as such, the applicant seeks to modify these existing planning board conditions to permit the maintenance of only the pool patio, the water feature, and the 6-foot chain link fence with privacy screening. The applicants proposed the removal of both gazebos as well as a 4-foot post and rail fence. Notably, the application will not disturb the vegetated nature of the buffer area, as the removal of the gazebos and the 4-foot post and rail fence will not interfere with the existing mature vegetation. The initial subdivision, known as the Equestrian Estates, was granted in 1991. Despite diligent efforts, the town has been unable to locate the original subdivision documentation, including approvals, memoranda, or transcripts, which were requested through a Freedom of Information Law request designated as S102449. I submit the request and response this evening as Exhibit B for your review. As such, the purpose of the buffer area must be inferred from available documentation and a review of the land use, zoning, and planning of the area, as well as a reasonable interpretation of land use buffer areas. In 1999, the former owner of the property sought to modify these deed covenants and restrictions to allow for encroachments into the buffer area. The town's planning board conducted hearings at which time they heard testimony both in favor and against the application. That application was ultimately denied by this board. In response to the planning board decision denying that application, Principal Planner Thomas J. Marquette outlined the purpose and intent of the buffer area in a correspondence dated April 20th, 1999, and explained that the buffer was created to screen properties from the traffic on the adjoining roads of Terry Road and Bedford Avenue and to preserve existing mature vegetation. He further explained that the benefits of maintaining the buffer was to protect the privacy, the property values, and the environmental quality of the residents in the area. That correspondence is submitted for the record as Exhibit C. And the importance of preserving the existing trees and other environmental features was further emphasized by Thomas J. Marcotte during a public hearing, which is reflected in the transcript and provided as Exhibit D. The application made in 1999 is materially different than the application we propose today. And there has been a material change in circumstances surrounding this application and the conditions at the site that has developed over the last 25 years. It's important to note that there was opposition in 1999 from nearby residents due to concerns about property maintenance and general disruptive behavior from the former property owner. The former property owner who put forth that application in 1999 was the original owner, purchased the subject premises from the developer in 1994 after that 1991 subdivision, and not only disregarded the deed covenants and restrictions, but failed to maintain neighborly relations with the adjacent property owners. In contrast, my clients purchased this property in 2005 with the encroachments existing. They've maintained positive relations with all of their neighbors since they purchased the property and have demonstrated a commitment to maintaining their property in accordance with community standards. As shown by the town's correspondence from the town's Department of Planning and Development dated June 20th, 2005, several years after the 1999 public hearings and submitted as Exhibit E, my clients were under the impression that the town was satisfied with the existing conditions at the subject premises when they purchased this property. Further, there have been no issues with the town, to my knowledge, or with the neighbors regarding the existing conditions at the site since they purchased their home approximately 20 years ago. Most importantly, perhaps, this case is distinguishable from the previous case in that my clients are suggesting the removal of the most obtrusive structures, namely the 2 gazebos, and has limited our request for relief to the bare minimum. As it relates to the current proposal and relief sought, I should note that my clients have spoken with all those who reside at each of the 10 properties located within the 200-foot radius. My clients have had positive conversations with each property owner within the radius area and have secured 9 letters of support, which I submit for the record, designated as Exhibit F. Of particular significance, these letters reflect support from all 4 property owners who reside on Bedford Avenue between Terry Road and Liberty Street, representing those most affected by the buffer area and tonight's decision. My client spoke with the property owner of the 10th residence located within the radius, and that conversation was a positive one as well. While that homeowner preferred not to put their support in writing, they did not express any issues with the proposal, nor do I expect their presence or opposition this evening. The proposal seeks to remove both gazebos, including the gazebo you'll note to the northeast corner of the buffer area and the gazebo towards the southeast of the property. Further, the proposal includes the removal of the 4-foot post and rail fence, which crosses the buffer towards the southeast. As discussed, we are seeking to maintain the pool patio, the water feature, and the 6-foot chain link fence. The pool patio, a minor grade level encroachment, is located within the natural buffer area to the west of that area. The pool patio, which has been existing since at least 1999, is only encroaching a few feet into the buffer area. It is not visible from Bedford Avenue and is approximately 150 feet from the front of the homes located on Bedford Avenue. Given the location of the pool, which has an approval from the Zoning Board of Appeals designated as ZBA number 417-97, the removal of this portion of the patio would not only pose a major hardship to my clients, but would also result in a narrow portion or no patio at all on the east side of the pool, potentially creating safety issues or access issues. The water feature, which has also been existing since at least 1999, is in the center of the buffer area, is approximately 5 feet at its top height, and has a water depth of approximately 1.9 feet. It is screened by existing mature vegetation and it is not visible from Bedford Avenue. Finally, the 6-foot chain link fence, improved with privacy screening, runs along the northern, eastern, and southern portions of the buffer area. This 6-foot chain link fence is improved with privacy screening and is in character with the 6-foot fences located at the properties to both the north and south of the subject premises to create an extended 6-foot fence on Bedford Avenue from Liberty Street running through Terry Road. Over the last 25 years, and I would like to highlight this point, Over the last 25 years, the tree canopy in this area, within the buffer area, has matured in a substantive way, resulting in a dense overhead vegetative screen that was not there in 1999, and a screen that effectively shields the eastern portion of the subject premises from view from Bedford Avenue. As illustrated by the photo submitted this evening as Exhibit G, neither the pool patio nor the water feature is visible from Bedford Avenue. As such, the continued presence of these improvements will not impose a visual or environmental disturbance to the surrounding properties. Overall, the modifications requested are consistent, in my view, with the original intent of the natural buffer area, specifically the preservation of privacy, property values, and environmental quality, while accommodating the applicant's proposed improvements in a way that minimizes the impact on the buffer area. The proposal reflects a balanced approach, allowing for the retention of existing and well-maintained improvements, while enhancing the buffer area through the removal of non-essential structures. And as such, I respectfully ask the board to approve the application as submitted. Thank you.
Thank you. We have no cards. Anybody who come in wish to be heard on this? Not seeing anyone, I'm going to turn to Mr. Gonzalez for a staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. As stated by the applicant's representative, this is a .9 acre property currently improved with a single-family dwelling. Originally CO'd in 1994 as part of the development of North Equestrian Court, which was a 1991 major subdivision. Several of the lots on the east side of that court were required to maintain a 50-foot natural area / conservation easement along the rear property line abutting Bedford Avenue to the east. The purpose of this conservation area was to preserve the native ecology in this immediate vicinity, maximize biodiversity for native species, including resident and migratory birds, provide a natural buffer along Bedford Avenue, and as is standard for all major subdivisions, limit the clearing of natural vegetation, which is a requirement of the subdivision and land development regulations. The prior owner removed vegetation, planted exotic and non-native species, built a cabana, fish pond, pool with patio, wooden gazebo, and fencing all within this area. In 1997, they applied to the ZBA to leave a 6-foot chain link fence on the easterly property line when it was required to be set back 15 feet, a minor side yard setback for the constructed pool, and a very significant front yard setback for the cabana. The pool setback itself, which is just to the pool, not to the patio, was granted. All other items were denied. The prior owner then applied for a modification of CNRs at the planning board in 1999 to allow the encroachments within the 50-foot conservation easement and was unanimously denied. Subsequent to the planning board denial, the prior owner filed an Article 78 at the Supreme Court in 2000 in an attempt to overturn the planning board denial. The court determined the owner's difficulty was self-created, the buffer requirements serve a benefit to the homeowners in the subdivision, and that the covenants had been observed by all other residents directly affected by those restrictions. The petition was dismissed. The current property owner acquired in 2005 and is now attempting to sell, according to the representative. However, these outstanding violations are an obstacle in that sale. The applicant is proposing to remove the 2 gazebos and the post and rail fence that runs perpendicular to the conservation area. However, keep the pool patio encroachment as well as the water feature and the 6-foot chain link fence that runs parallel to the rear property line, but is not at a compliant setback. If the planning board granted these encroachments, the applicant must still apply to the zoning board for variances on setbacks for the water feature and that 6-foot chain link fence. So typically with a 6-foot fence, you need a 15-foot setback from the right-of-way, which is the back Bedford Avenue. They installed it on, the prior owner installed it on the property line originally. At some point, it was moved further back, most likely after the original zoning board denial, but not compliant enough, and it wouldn't have been compliant anyway because he's moving it further into the buffer. What should have been there would be a 4-foot fence on the property line to the east. The applicant must demonstrate a valid argument that meets the original intent of the conservation area, which was previously stated in this report. Any grant of encroachments may provide precedent for the other properties with the same restrictions and older major subdivision developments as a whole to request the same relief. So at this time, staff would leave discussion up to the board on the merits of the application.
Thank you. Questions from the board? So I guess this is in place, it's been in place. It's been before this board, it's been unanimously denied by this board. It's been sent to the Supreme Court, and the application was denied. I understand you're removing a few of the items from there and only leaving some in place. But again, if we approve this evening, one, what is the original intent of what was there? And what your client says is minor, or you say on behalf of your client is minor, how do we differentiate that from the next person who comes in next door who wants to pour concrete only 5 or 6 feet into the area, who wants to build whatever they want to build into that area that's at ground level or the like?
Sure.
Explain that to me.
Yes, absolutely. Well, first and foremost, I, respect the board's precedent. It's important. However, I think a carefully crafted decision could limit any, future disturbances in the area. I think when we look at the 1999 application, I think my position is this application is substantially different. It's approximately 50% different. At that time, the applicant was seeking to maintain both gazebos, the fence, the water structure, the pool patio, and the 4-foot post and rail fence. Whereas we're proposing the removal of 3 of those items and the maintenance of 3 of those items. I think our application respects the initial intent of the buffer area. When we talk about privacy, the rear of the yard is completely screened from Bedford Avenue. When we talk about property values, there would be a de minimis, if any, value change for the folks in the area, as shown by the 9 letters of support. I don't believe that residents in the area would sign on to this application in a large number if they believe the application would have a detrimental impact on their property values. Actually, in the opposite contrast, if anything, if this application is denied, it could potentially have a negative impact on the property value of my client. So I think that when we talk about the future and the minimization of any precedent issues, a carefully created decision could limit that, as shown by the fact that we're limiting our scope here. The encroachments at grade, they're not visible from Bedford Avenue. There's large community support, and these encroachments have been in place for well over 25 years.
I'm going to turn to Mr. Brown, then I have more questions afterwards.
Yeah, so the way I look at it is, you're willing to take down a fence, you're willing to move a couple of gazebos, but what you're doing is you're asking us to allow the concrete and approach it into the zone. You're asking us to allow a 6-foot fence, which it shouldn't be, which should be a 4-foot. You're asking us to leave the water feature. So what you're willing to do to take down is one thing, but what you're asking us to permit and allow into the zone is a lot. And this is not the first of these, one of these before the board. We've been through it, we've been pretty consistent with denying them over many years. And it's not just because of one application, it's because of the precedent it sets, and not just on this property in Hop Park. If we do this here, somebody comes to us in East Islip. It sets a precedent. So for that reason, Mr. Chairman, I would be against this.
If I may, with respect to the 6-foot fence, I think it's important to note that the properties to both the north and the south have a 6-foot fence that runs along Bedford Avenue. One of them has an approval, has a variance approval for that 6-foot fence. So of course I understand we would need to go to the Board of Zoning Appeals should we receive the relief we're seeking tonight. I don't think it's out of character with the area. I also think that the 6-foot fence actually contributes to the intent and purpose of the conservation easement area, in that it adds to the screening and privacy and the aesthetics of what the folks on Bedford Avenue are looking at when they look at the back of the homes on North Equestrian. And, again, I do completely understand and respect the board's precedent. I just would like to highlight the fact that this has been here for over 25 years, has disturbed no one. There has been no issues. I believe that this application fully respects and honors the initial intent of this buffer area, and by approving this application, you would be upholding and honoring the initial intent of that buffer area, not acting in conflict with.
Yeah, another thing I don't understand, if this came back, that the decision came back from the Supreme Court on the Article 78, why is this still here?
Well, that was in 1999.
Why is this still here?
Sure, that was in 1999. My clients purchased the property in 2005. These remained in place during that period. As I provided to you, there is a letter from the Department of Planning and Development, Town of Islip, in June 20th, 2005, that states in part, therefore, based upon the way the yard can be used, I am satisfied with the results of the existing material and new plantings. So apparently in 2005, that is one of the exhibits towards the end. I welcome you to take a look.
No, I read through those that you handed up to us.
Sure. So
I did see that.
I just submit that, while I completely understand the point you're making, it appears that there were inspections that took place by building
Right, and
officials.
One other question, when the property was purchased by the current owner, weren't they aware that there was an Article 78? Was that brought up by their attorney?
Well, I did not represent them at the time. I can't speak to whether they are aware of the Article 78. However, in having conversations with them, they did review this 2005 correspondence, and were under the impression that there were no issues with the town, and there hasn't been any issues with the town since.
Can I say something?
Sure.
So, get Mr. Ridgway, then I'll come back.
Yeah, first, the letter that you referred to back on June 20th, 2005, from Dan Dolman, he specifically states in the first paragraph that his inspection was with regard to the planting of 6 rhododendrons and 9 mountain laurel. So it's an addition. You also added 3 Cornus cousas in the rear yard. So it's the addition of the plantings that he's inspected and says he thinks those are fine. That's the intent of this. But getting to the important part of this application, it may seem trivial that such nice improvements on a piece of property could be opposed by a town. The fact of the matter is, and we keep talking about precedent, is that we get applications like this all the time about conservation easements that have been placed, and they've been placed for a reason. You're saying this particular application is in keeping with the intent of the original conservation easement. The problem is, there is an easement that's there. Once there's an encroachment on that easement, we can't pick and choose and say what encroachments are appropriate and what aren't. Here, you happen to have a very nice-looking backyard, so we should say, okay, let's approve this. Your client wants to sell his property. The new owner puts in a purple shed, that's something that, and I have nothing against purple, but just something that is obnoxious looking, let's say. And then all the neighbors that gave us consent say, oh, no, they're encroaching on the easement. How do we go back and we enforce something like that? So, and it's not just for this community. Right now, there's 4 residents that are affected by this conservation easement. Like Mr. Brown said, there are neighborhoods in East Islip and West Islip and all over this town that have similar conservation easements that were put in keeping with the subdivision laws. And I don't think it's up to this board to just willy-nilly say, okay, this one's not okay. Maybe your client and previous clients back in 1999 are going about this the wrong way. If you don't like the conservation easement, don't go back for a singular exception for it. All the neighbors, the 4 neighbors get together and look to amend the conservation easement. Maybe instead of a 50-foot, it's a 25-foot. Maybe it's, and you use the arguments that it's been in effect for X amount of years and it's in keeping with the original intent. But the whole conservation easement, as far as I'm concerned, would have to be amended, not just one portion of it for one particular property owner. because then that puts this board in a very, very bad position. And I think as an attorney, you can understand that. And as well-crafted as we could put together a decision and conditions, I don't think you're going to get over that precedent issue.
Understood. And I appreciate, your comments and
wanna
feedback.
explain it.
Absolutely. No, I appreciate your comments and feedback. I would just respond with a few notes. We have to infer what was happening in the early 2000s. And while I understand that your interpretation of this letter is that the inspector was there to view the plantings, I find it curious that they wouldn't mention anything about the structures in the buffer area. So my interpretation of the letter would read, or would be, that there weren't any issues at that time. Otherwise, I would think that they would be highlighted in the letter. But I certainly do understand that you're feeling in that the primary purpose of the inspection was relating to the plantings. And while I understand the idea and the concept of getting the neighborhood together to potentially amend the easement area as on a unified front, as I'm sure you would agree, that is difficult to do, difficult to coordinate, and the board does have the ability to view this case and the totality of the circumstances and to make a decision based on the information presented today, which I strongly feel honors the intent of the easement area. However, I respect and hear you loud and clear.
I'm just not following you. So there is an easement area that says what you cannot do there.
Right.
You're doing that there. How does this meet the intent?
Well,
I'm not following your argument.
Sure.
If you're building into the easement area, you have a chain link fence where you're only supposed to have a stockade fence. You put in the water in the fountain. Your bricks are going into there. Okay, you're removing some of the other structures. How does that meet the intent? The intent is clear.
Sure. Well, according to the 1999 transcripts and correspondence from Thomas J. Marquette, the principal planner at the time, the intent of the buffer area is for privacy, screening, environmental quality, to maintain property values, okay? When we talk about screening and buffering, the maintenance of this...
So the entire easement, we just get rid of it because we don't need it anymore?
That's not what I'm suggesting.
Well, it sort of sounds like it.
Because speaking to the three items that I'm seeking relief on, I'll go through them. The pool patio, can't see it from Bedford Avenue. Privacy is good. Screening is good. It's been there for 25 years. I don't believe it's had a detrimental impact on the quality of the environment. And if anyone's property value is going to be decreased by the removal of that pool patio, it's going to be my client, not anyone in the neighborhood. When you talk about the water feature, it can't be seen from Bedford Avenue. It's screened. It's buffered. Again, I don't have any evidence here that it's had a detrimental impact on the environment. It's been there for 25 to 30 years. And again, when you talk about property values, which was outlined by Thomas J. Marquette, I don't believe it's going to have a detrimental impact on anybody's property values if it's maintained there, except for, my client, if we have to remove it. And as far as the fence is concerned, it's in character and conformance with the community. There's a 6-foot fence that runs from Terry to Liberty. And again, it is a part of the screening and buffering of the landscape buffer area.
So it's a conservation easement. In order to go in there and put the concrete down that nobody can see, you have to remove vegetation, right? In the conservation easement, you'd have to, obviously, concrete is replacing something that was green that was there.
Sure.
Okay, so there, it's still, in your theory, it's still meeting the intent of the easement?
These structures were put in by the former owner.
I'm aware of that, and
Understood.
again, they've been sitting there
Right.
illegally by
Yep.
both denial of this board
Sure.
and New York State Supreme Court.
Right. I understand. And I respect
some
that.
attorney somewhere in a closing process
Yep.
didn't catch this.
Yep, absolutely.
So we're here now, not so the current owners can continue to enjoy it, but they're apparently pending a sale and need this approved in order to go through with that.
Sure.
So, but the issue here goes back to the same thing. I think Mr. Frugieri brought up a good point in a way that this could possibly be resolved. But for us to start one by one going through this, on anybody who wants to do this and creating a precedent today that extends, as Mr. Brown said, to every other easement that's in the town is not the way we're going to go about this.
I understand.
We're willing to work with you. There's a good suggestion from Mr. Frugieri that this board may go along with.
Understood.
But To say that the intent of the easement is being met when vegetation has been removed in order to put that in place, saying it's been there for 25 years illegally, is okay, is not something that this board is going to accept. And clearly, I mean, I've read the letter, and I've spoken to Mr. Colgan, who might have actually been on that visit. What was there was to look at the plantings that were put in place, not to comment on what else was in the easement, including the gazebos and whatever else is out there. I mean, your argument then should be tonight, let's approve it all, because the inspector was hearing this letter and said everything was fine. So, I mean, from my perspective, I think you should consider what Mr. Ferrugieri has laid on the table this evening.
Sure.
If that's not the direction you want to go in, I'm happy to call a vote on the application that's before us.
Well, I would absolutely consider the suggestion separate and apart from tonight's application, but for purposes of this application where we are in a transaction, I think that I've made our position clear. Again, I think our application does maintain, honor, and respect the purpose and intent of the buffer area as outlined by Town of Islip officials, but I very much respect and understand your position as well, and I ask that you approve this application as submitted, but understand your position as well.
Yeah, I would just say your argument on the easement is there for a reason. Anything that goes into that easement removes vegetation that was originally there and supposed to stay in place. So it does not meet the intent of the easement. To say that you can build something just because you don't see it, one of the conditions does not satisfy all the conditions of that easement. So you have a flaw in your argument there, and the letter in and of itself, speaking to somebody who was there for the inspection and reading the letter on its face value, does not suggest that everything that's in that easement is appropriate or okay.
Sure.
So-
I understand. I would just say, when we talk about the conservation easement area, you know, this isn't the Central Pine Barrens. My understanding is that there aren't protected species in this area, and that the vegetation that is there now is significantly more robust than it was in 1991, 1994, or 1999. So the area has overall been enhanced over recent decades. But again, I don't want to belabor any of the points. I understand your position, and
I would just say for the record, I trust that you're making a good argument, but I don't know that you know what the vegetation that was there back 25 years ago, to probably as anybody on this board to make a comment, is what was native back then is worse than what is there now, or the like. And I don't want to argue with you, that's not the purpose of it.
Totally, I understand.
What I'm suggesting is that, you know, one by one, it's in place.
Yep.
So we have to look at what's before us. There is an alternative that's been suggested by Mr. Ferrugieri, which we may agree with the majority of us or all of us, that would actually resolve the matter if all those people who bought property, understanding that easement is there and who has not built on that easement, is okay with it going away. We can then look at that and make a determination as to whether or not keeping the vegetation in place and the rest is
Understood.
appropriate and needed. But my opinion mirrors Mr. Brown's in and of itself, by itself. While it's unfortunate, it's there for a reason, and to start creating one-off exceptions and saying in this case it's fine, but when the neighbor next door wants to pour concrete, it's no longer fine, or it doesn't work for me.
I understand.
And from what I'm understanding is you would like a decision this evening on the application as you submitted it before this board tonight.
I
You don't want to
welcome-
go back and
I
consider
welcome
Mr.
that.
Ferrugieri's recommendation. Are there further questions from the board members? Anything further from the applicant?
No, sir.
Is there a motion? Oh, Mr. Gonzalez?
I'd have to look at the original subdivision approval. The requirements for natural space may be different than they are currently. Currently, they're 25% of the overall lot. It may not have been that back then. So another option that would have to be weighed if they did come back with all the property owners and reduce that depth, if it has the same requirements of that percentage, they would be subject to that landscape mitigation fee that we now collect.
Right.
So I'd have to look at the numbers of the original approval and then see how much it's being reduced by, and they would potentially be assessed that, each property owner. So that's another decision they would have to make.
But it doesn't sound like they want to go in that direction, but if they do,
Well-
that's something else to be considered.
Sure, I just want to reiterate the possibility of moving in that direction. I just at this time can't tell you if that is a route we're going to take. Of course, I need to speak with several different parties, and I'm not sure if my client will still be here at that time. So I do just want to, say that I understand the comment, and I'm certainly going to explore it.
Ms. Cruz?
So, just so I know, so the only thing your client's willing to take out are the gazebos, not the pond?
Our application this
They-
evening is to remove the 2 gazebos and the 4-foot post and rail fence. The application proposes to maintain the pool patio, the water feature, and the 6-foot fence.
Because if your client is selling the property, I don't see what detriment is it to them to remove that, to sell the house. That's just, I don't understand why that's
Sure.
such a big issue. You're going to sell the house anyway, and why not comply after all these years? It's my
I
point.
understand and appreciate your comment, and it'll be something that I will speak with the client about.
Thank you. Anything further?
No, sir.
Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Brown?
I'd like to make a motion to close the public hearing and deny the application.
It's a motion by Mr. Brown to close the public hearing and deny the application. Is there a second?
I'd like to deny it based on the testimony that we've had tonight.
Thank you. Is there a second? I'll second. Second by Ms. Frugieri. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? The application is denied. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, members of the board. I appreciate your time.
Where did I put my agendas? What do I do? Give me an application. Here we go. All right. Item 4 was adjourned. Item 5, site plan modification decision item, Oliver Broadleib, SP 2023-061, south side of Sunrise Highway, South Service Road, 650 feet west of Broadway Avenue, Sayville, 5700 Sunrise Highway. Applicant requests a parking relaxation and permission to locate 2 overhead doors facing Sunrise Highway in connection with the new 1-story addition to an existing dealership and service center. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I am Alyssa Stoller Sinatra of Germano and Cahill, 4250 Veterans Memorial Highway, Suite 275, Holbrook, New York, for the applicant. Also with me tonight is Doug Castellano, an engineer at North Coast Civil. We also have Bill Brown and Stephen Latessa here from TACA. They're representatives of the owner. The application before you tonight is in connection with the expansion of the East Hills Subaru and Volkswagen of Sayville. The applicant is requesting a slight parking relaxation to provide 174 parking spaces where 178 are required, and also to allow 2 overhead doors to be utilized for the service stations that would be facing Sunrise Highway Service Road. So with regard to the parking relaxation, the parking relaxation is what we consider as de minimis. It would be a 2.25% relaxation. Of the 174 parking spaces provided, 60 spaces would be for customers. They're provided along the north side of the facility closest to the public entranceways and public entranceways of the existing and proposed addition, as well as to the south of the proposed addition. There are also 41 parking spaces for employees being provided to the south of the facility. And just as a note, there are about 60 employees between the 2 operations at the site, but they are not always working they're never working at the same time, all 60 of them. We also are providing 73 parking spaces in the rear of the facility for service. So we don't believe that there should be any parking overflow issues, and this is for several reasons. As mentioned, there are 73 service spaces provided. On average, the service station handles about 40 cars per day, and it's by appointment only. So any risk of overparking at the site could be mitigated by appropriate appointment making and staggering those appointments. The service departments can also hold approximately 30 vehicles inside the building that are being worked on, between 23 service bays and 7 spaces in the queue, further mitigating the risk of a parking shortage. Since service spaces are unlikely to be fully utilized, there should be additional parking for any reason that may occur. We are also requesting overhead doors be placed for use of the service stations. Pursuant to approved site plans, the service department of Sayville Ford, directly to the west of the facility, has 2 overhead doors facing the service road, and also Generation Kia in Bohemia also has 2 overhead doors facing the service road for access to the service department. So based on the foregoing, we respectfully request that the board grant this decision, this application for the requested relaxations. We're here for any questions that you may have.
Thank you. I'm going to turn to Mr. Gonzalez for a staff report, and we'll come back if there are any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. This is a business 3 zone, 3-acre property currently improved with the existing Subaru Volkswagen car dealership CO'd in 1987, with minor additions in 99 and 2010. The town board changed the zone from business 1 to business 3 for special permits regarding outdoor storage and display, repair of vehicles, and body shop repair at the facility in 1984. The existing gross floor area is approximately 18,300 square feet, and the proposal is for a 1,343 square foot mezzanine addition and a 12,600 square foot building addition on the west side. This new addition would house the service drop-off center and department, showroom, sales office, and parts storage. The applicant is requesting a 4-stall parking relaxation, 178 required, 174 provided, and permission to locate overhead doors facing Sunrise Highway. The overhead doors on the plan before you are for the service drop-off center, which would align directly with the existing curb cut for the property on the service road. The doors are aluminum and glass panel, set back approximately 80 feet from the Sunrise Highway service road. The architectural elevations I do have here, if any of the board would like to see them, and will be subject to planning approval prior to the issuance of any building permit. And I did some calculations before the hearing just to kind of give a comparison of the parking stalls that were existing on the property right now versus with the new building addition, how many there would be. So currently, there are approximately 184 parking stalls plus inventory space in the southwest part of the property. The new proposal would be 174 parking stalls plus the new inventory area, which is being pushed all the way to the south, plus a 23-car service bay and 7 vehicle queue. So that brings the total to 204 versus the original 184. So technically, space for cars is being increased, and that's for patrons and employees. This isn't counting the inventory space. That's an additional component. So I just wanted to make that clear to the board. So if that addresses the applicant's and the board's concern, staff has prepared conditions for the board.
Thank you. Any questions from the board? Anything further from the applicant?
No.
Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, based on Mr. Tanner's staff report, I'd like to make a motion, subject to the town attorney approving the CNRs, that we approve the application.
So, motion is to grant the application subject to the CNRs being approved by the town attorney.
Thank you very much.
Is there a second? By Ms. Cruz, all in favor? Opposed, abstentions, the application is granted. Thank you.
Thank you.
Road opening bond release, Christine and Kimraj Bawani, RO 2017-003, west side of Paper Montauk Avenue, number 0, 295 feet north of Atlantic Street, Central Islip. Applicant requests a full bond release in connection with a prior approved road opening application for a single-family dwelling. Good evening, Mr. Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. This application was given final approval by the planning board in 2018 for a road opening of Montauk Avenue to construct a single-family dwelling. At this time, all work has been completed and signed off. The dwelling is CO'd and the extension of Montauk Avenue is ready for dedication. So based on this, staff recommends the board grant the full release of the cash bonds, there's 2 of them, in the amount of $31,578 and $10,000, subject to the town board acceptance of this dedication and recording at the Suffolk County Clerk's office.
Is there a motion to adopt Tanner's last statement to release the 2 bonds?
Mr. Chairman, make a motion to accept Tanner's math and the application. I approve the bond release for $31,578 and the second one for $10,000.
It's a motion by Mr. Brown to grant the application and release the 2 bonds in the amount stated. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Wilson. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? The application is approved and the bonds are released. Item 7, Planning Board application, decision item, Taco Bell of America LLC, PB 2023-042, south side of Veterans Memorial Highway, State Route 454, approximately 0 feet east of Fifth Avenue, Bohemia, 0 Veterans Memorial Highway. Applicant requests a Planning Board special permit for a fast food restaurant with drive-through and approval of outdoor seating in the Industrial Corridor District pursuant to Section 68-466.1L2 and 68-467H1 respectively. Site plan modifications may be required as part of this application. Applicant also requests a waiver of zoning code section 68-423.4C to allow less transparent glass on the street front facades, 68-423.4D to allow a drive-through service window in the second front yard, 68-423.11A to allow a 12-car queue lane in the second front yard, and 68-423.11D to waive the sidewalk requirements along Fifth Avenue. Good evening to the applicant. We can either accept your presentation or go right to Ms. Wozniak, whatever you prefer.
We could go right to Ms. Wozniak if we'd like.
We'll go to Ms. Wozniak, then we'll come back to you. Thanks.
Sure.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. At the previous hearing, the board requested their representative speak with their client regarding the installation of a sound attenuation wall, which has been a standard set by the board for late-night uses adjacent to residential homes. Since that hearing, the applicant has agreed to install an 8-foot sound attenuation fence surrounding the drive-through lane. In addition, the applicant has agreed to the hours of operation and upgraded the proposed plaza area in front of the building to better align with the ICD study goals. So based on this, planning recommends the board grant the application subject to the attached conditions.
Would the applicant like to add anything?
Just to make my appearance, Greg Alvarez from Amato Law Group on behalf of Taco Bell. We've obviously worked very hard together on this, and we believe we've come to an arrangement that hopefully is mutually acceptable to all parties.
And all the conditions and covenants are agreed to?
Yes.
Any questions from the board? Is there a motion? From anybody on my right-hand side? Mr. Wilson.
I'd like to make a motion to grant this application.
Motion by Mr. Wilson to grant the application subject to the covenants restrictions. Second by Mr.
Second.
Rulon.
Yeah.
All in favor? Opposed, abstentions, the application is granted. Thank you. Sorry
Thank
to
you
make
very
you wait.
much. Have a good night.
Final application on the board this evening, Planning Board application decision item, George Dietzer, PB 2024-029, southwest corner of North Research Place and Carlton Avenue, County Route 17, Central Islip, 20 North Research Place. Applicant requests Planning Board's approval for signage in the PDD-RS district pursuant to 68-324C3A. Good evening, Ms. Wozniak again.
Thank you. The subject property is located on the northwest corner of North Research Place and Carlton Avenue in Central Islip, and it's the site of several retail stores and restaurant pad sites. The applicant is looking to obtain signage approval for one of the tenant spaces in the northern retail building on site, which will be a retail store for sneakers and clothing. The applicant is proposing a 68-square-foot internally illuminated channel letter sign on the front of the retail space, which will be installed directly to the building facade. The proposed sign is consistent with other signage in the retail center, therefore planning recommends the board approve the signage as presented.
Are there any questions for Ms. Wozniak? Not seeing any. Is there a motion?
Motion to grant the application.
Motion by Mr. Rulon to grant the application. Is there a second? Second by Ms. Cruz. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, the application is granted. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I'd like to make a motion
Mr. Brown?
to close the meeting.
It's a motion by Mr. Brown to adjourn the meeting. Is there a second? By Ms. Cruz. All in favor? Opposed, abstentions, we are adjourned. Thank you.